Pro-Palestinian protesters outside Senator Lindsey Graham's Oconee County home today. Senator Graham posted this video on social media saying he respects their right to peacefully protest and apologize to his neighbors.
Everyone keeps asking the same question. Where does Lindsey Graham live? And who lives there with him? Is there a hidden partner, a secret life behind the headlines? According to his official Senate biography, he has never married. Public property records show a modest home in Seneca, South Carolina. So what is really going on? Today, we uncover where Lindsey Graham's house is, who actually shares that space, and why the partner theory refuses to fade. If there is no confirmed partner, why does this question never disappear? The house in Seneca. The answer begins in one quiet town in South Carolina, the kind of place where the loudest debate is usually about football, not foreign policy. Seneca sits up in the state's golden corner, close to lake water and long two-lane roads, and it feels miles away from the bright studio lights of Washington. That distance matters. When people search, "Where does Lindsey Graham live?" or "Lindsey Graham House," they expect a power player mansion.
Went into effect. The protest comes after Republican Senator Lindsey Graham introduced a bill.
The verified home base is smaller, steadier, and very real. Here's the clean receipt. Lindsey Graham's official Senate biography says, in plain words, that he lives in Seneca. No wink, no mystery, just a simple line that locks his home base to a real place. And once you know that, the whole secret partner obsession starts to look different. If the town is not hidden, why do people keep insisting that the life inside the town must be hidden? Search results also push phrases like Lindsey Graham Seneca House and Lindsey Graham Home in South Carolina. But keywords aren't answers. They're breadcrumbs. The story is what those breadcrumbs are leading you toward today. Seneca is not a random dot on a map. It's a rhythm. It's the kind of community where people recognize your truck and where privacy is less about walls and more about manners. Britannica walks through his South Carolina background and the long climb into national politics, which helps explain why a small town can still feel like the safest harbor. If you were in his shoes, would you choose the non-stop buzz of DC or a place where your name is just your name? Now, let's talk about the house without doing anything creepy. We're not dropping an address. We're not zooming into Google Street View like it's a video game. But public reporting has described the basics. During the 2016 campaign era, a real estate roundup noted he maintained two residences, a ranch-style home in Seneca and a townhome in Washington, D.C. That alone tells you something important. This is not a one-life setup. It's a two-map life. And here's where the contrast sharpens. Seneca is the home base, the place that feels personal. Washington is the work base, the place that runs on schedules, votes, and cameras. The same reporting described the Seneca home as roughly 1,901 square feet and the D.C. townhome as smaller, with public record-style details like size and assessed value listed for that period. That's not celebrity excess. That's logistics. It's the political version of keeping a weekend bag packed. So picture what that looks like in real life.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham has introduced a new bill today pushing for a national abortion ban after 15 weeks of pregnancy.
A modest ranch home doesn't scream mystery romance. It whispers routine. A key on a hook, a fridge that gets opened after a late flight, a porch light that actually serves a purpose. What would you expect that house to look like if you didn't know who owned it? And be honest, would you even notice it if you drove past? This is where the internet gets restless. Because biographies are loud about careers and quiet about domestic details. In the sources we're using, you'll notice what's not emphasized. His Senate biography talks about his work and his roots, but it does not spotlight a spouse. Britannica focuses on elections, roles, and political turns, not a married life storyline. That absence isn't a gotcha. It's simply the shape of the public record people keep trying to turn into gossip. And that's the real engine of the rumor. When the paperwork is quiet, imagination gets loud. When a public figure doesn't fit the usual template, the internet tries to force a template onto them. Seneca becomes more than a town. The house becomes more than a house. It becomes a blank screen where people project theories, then call the projection evidence. But we're staying grounded. We can confirm the where. Seneca, we can confirm the how. A South Carolina home base and a DC footprint. And we can ask why. Maybe it's privacy. Maybe it's comfort. Maybe it's loyalty to the place that raised him. Still, one question keeps sticking like a burr. If that's where he lives, who exactly lives there with him? The missing partner mystery. Here's the part competitors gloss over. When we ask who exactly lives there with him, most videos sprint straight into rumor like it's a finish line. But if we're doing this with solid research, we have to start with what reputable sources actually say, not what comment sections want to be true. And the clean answer is this. There is no confirmed spouse and no confirmed live-in romantic partner reported in the mainstream sources we're using. That is not dodging the question. That is the point of the mystery. Lindsey Graham has been a national figure for decades.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham introduced a bill that would ban abortion starting at 15 weeks, and that would be all across the nation.
And yet his public biography remains unusually spare on romance. That silence is exactly what feeds the internet's obsession. People magazine covered his memoir, My Story, and it lays something out plainly. He says he never married, and he frames it around timing and life choices. He describes being a long-time bachelor and explains that the right time never lined up. Either he did not find the right person, or the right person did not have time for the life he was building. That is not a secret lover hiding behind a curtain. That is a man describing a life that kept moving in one direction. Now notice how that lands online. The internet struggles with simple endings. We treat a single man in power like an unsolved case file. Once someone becomes a puzzle, every missing detail becomes evidence. But ask yourself this: why do we assume every public figure must have a hidden partner? Why is bachelorhood treated like a plot twist instead of a lifestyle? Wikipedia, as a secondary reference, repeats the same public storyline. He has never married and has no children. It also references memoir coverage, noting that he had relationships earlier in life, and at one point even considered proposing. That matters. It undercuts the dramatic narrative that there was no romance ever. Therefore, something must be hidden. The more grounded truth is less cinematic, but more believable. He dated, he considered marriage, he did not settle down, and he stayed private. And privacy is rocket fuel for speculation. Think about how YouTube titles work. Lindsey Graham's house in Seneca is factual but quiet. Lindsey Graham lives with his partner, sparks curiosity. The algorithm loves tension. When a public figure does not present a spouse at events or post family photos, the audience fills the silence with a story that feels more satisfying. Here's the calm, dismantling part. There is a difference between not publicly confirmed and secretly confirmed. Those are not the same thing. A lack of public proof is not proof of a hidden romance. It is simply a lack of public proof. That is why searches like, "Does Lindsey Graham have a partner?" produce bold claims, but very little that is verifiable. So what is actually happening? The missing partner mystery is less about a person and more about our discomfort with incomplete narratives. We like political figures packaged neatly: spouse, kids, and holiday photos. When those labels are missing, people treat the absence like a scandal. Are we uncomfortable with solitude and power? Or are we addicted to the idea that every important figure hides a secret? Now let's connect this back to Seneca. A small-town home base makes it easier to live quietly. Not secretly, quietly. The more ordinary the living situation appears, the more certain corners of the internet insist something must be hidden. Here's the question we should be asking. If there is no confirmed romantic partner, and no confirmed spouse living in Seneca, then what actually fills that house? The Washington parallel life. Because Lindsey Graham doesn't just live in one place. And once you see the two-location rhythm clearly, the whole partner question starts to feel different. Not smaller, just reframed. Like we've been staring at one doorway while the real story moves back and forth between two.
But South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham made a big military announcement today. We broke the story this morning on WYFF4.com.
Back in Seneca, the vibe is grounded, quiet streets, church community, familiar routines. His official Senate biography keeps it simple. He lives in Seneca, South Carolina. That is the anchor. That is the home base. But when the calendar flips to Senate week, everything shifts. Washington, D.C. becomes a parallel life. At neighbors waving, security lines, briefings, votes, late-night calls that do not care what time zone your body prefers. And this is not speculation. Public reporting makes it specific. He has a ranch-style home in Seneca and a brick townhome in Washington. 2 homes, 2 environments, 2 versions of the same man. Now, here is where it gets human. Many people search, where does Lindsey Graham live? Expecting one private space where a hidden truth sits behind closed curtains. But his life is built around movement. The LA Times described the Seneca property as a 1,901 square foot ranch purchased decades ago. The Washington property was described as a smaller 2-bedroom, 2-bath townhome bought in the late 90s. Those details matter. They show something practical, not flashy. A work base and a home base. A lifestyle defined by travel between them. So ask yourself something real. Can a career become your primary companion? When your weeks are split between a Senate office and a D.C. townhome, and your weekends return you to South Carolina, intimacy does not survive on intention alone. It has to survive distance. It has to survive scrutiny. And when you are constantly in public, constantly analyzed, where do you protect something private? This is the layer many competitors skip. They state, no partner confirmed, then pivot to speculation. But the more interesting angle is structural. In Washington, the House functions like a staging area. Change suits, review briefing papers, sleep for a few hours, repeat. In Seneca, the House feels more personal, yet even that space is never fully isolated from national controversy. You can feel that tension in online conversations. Some people imagine the Seneca home as a secret bunker. Others imagine it as a peaceful retreat. The truth is less dramatic and more revealing. It is simply a house owned by someone whose profession walks through the door with him. Does constant public life leave room for private intimacy? That is not clickbait. That is the core tension. Relationships need time. They need stability. They need space to be ordinary. Political life rewards none of that. It rewards performance and constant availability. And here is a detail that reshapes the image. The LA Times profile framed both properties as long-held, steady residences. That suggests routine, not chaos. A consistent DC base and a consistent South Carolina base, which leads to a sharper question than, who is the partner? If your existence revolves around 2 cities and non-stop travel, what would that rhythm do to a relationship, even if one existed? That is where the word partner evolves. For some, it means romance. For others, it means purpose. It can mean the role itself, the mission that structures your days. When your schedule is always full and your phone is always buzzing, the job can start to feel like the thing waiting for you at home. And then, in 2024, that illusion of quiet was interrupted. Protesters showed up outside his Seneca house, turning private space into a public stage. A reminder that in modern politics, even your front yard can become part of the debate. So now we return to that doorway. If there is no confirmed romantic partner, and if even home keeps getting pulled into the spotlight, what truly fills that house when he is there? The day the protest came to the doorstep. On July 4th, 2024, his private address became public theater. Not in Washington, not on a Senate hearing live stream, but right there in Seneca, South Carolina, where the whole point of home is that you get to stop performing. And yet, that day, the outside world followed him all the way to the doorstep. According to reports, a pro-Palestinian protest took place outside Senator Lindsey Graham's home in Seneca, tied to anger over his support for Israel as the Israel-Hamas war continued. The timing was the part that felt almost cinematic. The 4th of July is supposed to be flags, food, family noise, and neighbors waving across driveways. Instead, it became signs, chants, and a message delivered where messages usually do not go. If you've ever searched, "Where does Lindsey Graham live?" or "Lindsey Graham Seneca home?" this is the moment where those searches stop being curiosity and start turning into something heavier. Because even if you never say the address out loud, the idea of a political figure's house becomes a target people can point at. The front yard becomes a stage. The street becomes a microphone. And suddenly, the quiet town that felt like a buffer between him and Washington becomes part of the Washington story anyway. Here's what the reporting said happened. Demonstrators picketed outside his home, carrying signs in support of Palestinians and protesting U.S. support for Israel. One report tied the protest to the Party for Socialism and Liberation's actions that day and described the protest as focused on Graham's stance and support. This wasn't a random group taking a wrong turn. It was intentional. It was political. It was aimed straight at the idea that public decisions should have personal consequences. Now pause with me for a second and imagine that scene from the inside. You're in your house, you look out, and the world is there, holding opinions like signs. What would it feel like to see protest signs outside your home? Not your office, not your job, your home, the place where you're supposed to exhale. This is where a lot of people's understanding of power gets tested. We love the phrase public servant, but we rarely talk about what it costs when the public decides your private space is now fair game. Does public office erase private space? Or is there still a line that should not be crossed? Even when feelings are intense and the stakes are global, Graham responded publicly. According to an ABC News 4 report, he issued a statement addressing the protest at his home on July 4th. The message was basically this. He said he respects the right to protest peacefully, but he apologized to neighbors for the disruption, and he made it clear his views on Israel were not changing. That's the part many people miss. This wasn't just a protest scene, it was a direct collision between geopolitics and a residential street. And notice the symbolism. Independence Day, a senator, a protest about U.S. policy, a small town. It is like every layer of American political identity on one date, outside one home. The message was not subtle, and the setting made it louder. Now, here's why this matters to our bigger storyline about this is where Lindsey Graham lives with his partner. Because when people hear partner, they instantly picture romance. But what if the real partner in this story is the thing that never leaves him alone, not even on a holiday? The job, the politics, the identity, the public role follows him home like a shadow that does not clock out. This also explains why the partner rumor refuses to die. When people cannot see a spouse, they start scanning for any sign of a personal life. And when the personal life stays private, they treat the privacy like proof of a secret. But events like this protest show a different kind of reality. Sometimes the loudest presence in a public figure's home life is not a person at all. It's pressure. It's controversial. It's the constant reminder that a senator's decisions do not stay in the Senate. And let's keep it real. For the audience watching videos like this, the hidden truth is often not a hidden lover. It's a hidden structure. It's how the machine works. A public official can have a modest home in Seneca and a work base in Washington and still never truly have a private day, because the world can arrive at the curb whenever it wants. So here's the question that changes how you see the whole "where does Lindsey Graham live" conversation. When does home stop being a sanctuary? When it becomes a place where politics can knock, uninvited, on the front door? What does that reveal about what actually fills that house and what most videos are missing on purpose? The invisible partner. Maybe the partner was never a person. That sounds dramatic, but stay with me. Because when you step back from the rumor culture and look at the verified record, something else starts to come into focus. If you search Lindsey Graham partner or who does Lindsey Graham live with, you are expecting a hidden name, a quiet romance, a secret cohabiting story. But the official biography and long-form summaries paint a very different pattern. His Senate biography centers on three things over and over again: South Carolina, public service, and duty, not marriage, not children, not domestic life. It describes his return to his home state after law school, his early service in the Air Force Reserve, his time in the House, and then his long tenure in the United States Senate. The timeline reads like a ladder of responsibility, not a romance novel, and that repetition matters. Britannica adds context that makes this even clearer. It talks about how he lost both parents while he was young and suddenly found himself responsible for helping raise his younger sister. That kind of early responsibility changes people. It forces adulthood fast. It builds independence early. And sometimes, when independence becomes your survival skill, it stays with you long after the crisis is over. But what if the partner in this house in Seneca is not a hidden person at all, but a lifelong commitment to work, identity, and place? Think about it. Decades in public office, years spent between Washington and South Carolina, a life built around campaigns, votes, hearings, and policy battles. Can devotion to a career replace a domestic partnership? For some people, the answer is absolutely no. For others, the career becomes the constant. It becomes a steady presence. It becomes the thing that never leaves. And then there is Seneca itself. His biography makes it clear that he did not detach from his home state as his profile grew. He anchored himself there. The house is not just property. It is symbolic. It represents continuity, roots, a fixed point in a life that otherwise runs on flights and headlines. Does a place become family over time? When you spend decades returning to the same town, the same community, and the same rhythms, it starts to function like one. Now, look at the pattern again. No confirmed spouse, no confirmed live-in romantic partner, but a constant return to service, a constant return to South Carolina, a constant return to the Senate floor. When something is that steady for that long, it starts to feel less like a job and more like a bond. And here is the uncomfortable question that sits underneath all of this. Is ambition a companion? Because ambition is demanding. It keeps you up late. It follows you home. It shapes your choices. It influences who stays and who leaves. It does not require candles and anniversaries, but it absolutely requires commitment. That does not mean there was never romance. His memoir coverage makes clear that he had relationships in the past and even considered marriage at one point. But timing, priorities, and the direction of his life never locked onto that path. Instead, the direction locked into something else. Public service became a long-term relationship. So when people ask, "This is where Lindsey Graham lives with his partner," maybe they are accidentally closer to the truth than they realize. The partner may not be a hidden person behind a curtain. The partner may be the mission itself, the state he serves, the role he chose, the structure he built his identity around. But patterns like that do not just appear in adulthood. They start earlier. They form in childhood. They harden in moments of crisis. And if this invisible partnership with duty has defined his life, then we need to go back and ask one more question. Where did that pattern begin? The early life blueprint. Before Seneca, there was Central South Carolina, long before the Senate floor, long before headlines about foreign policy, long before people searched Lindsey Graham partner or who does Lindsey Graham live with. There was a small-town childhood that shaped the structure of his life. Britannica and coverage of his memoir both point to a turning point that happened early. He lost both of his parents while he was still young, not decades apart, close enough together that adulthood arrived suddenly. One day, he was a teenager. Next, he was helping raise his younger sister. That is not a small detail. That is architecture. When responsibility shows up early, it changes the wiring. You stop asking what you want and start asking what needs to be done. You stop drifting and start planning. And when that mindset forms at 16 or 17, it does not disappear at 40 or 60. It becomes your operating system, He has spoken about that period as a defining chapter. Suddenly, he was managing bills, keeping life stable, and making sure his sister could finish school. There was no long pause to process. There was action. There was duty. There was forward motion. Does early responsibility make independence permanent? That question is not psychological drama. It is practical. When you survive by being self-reliant, you learn to trust yourself first. And here is the part most videos skip because it is not flashy. That kind of upbringing can quietly shape how you view partnership. If you are used to carrying weight alone, you may not instinctively build your life around leaning on someone else. That does not mean you avoid connection. It means you are wired for structure, control, and purpose. Memoir coverage makes clear he dated. He considered marriage. There were moments when that door could have opened, but the pattern kept pulling him toward public life, law school, Air Force Reserve, prosecutor, House of Representatives, United States Senate. Each step required focus. Each step required time. Do some lives get built around duty from the start? When you look at this blueprint, it feels less accidental and more consistent. And then there is geography, Central, then Seneca, then Washington, but always South Carolina at the core. That is not random. That is continuity. The same state that shaped his childhood shaped his adult identity. When you return to the same soil year after year, it becomes more than an address. It becomes grounding. So when people look at the house in Seneca and ask why it feels like there is a missing room, maybe they are sensing something deeper. Maybe the missing partner narrative is actually the visible result of a life designed around duty first, companionship second. Could that explain the missing room? Not a secret, not a scandal, just a structure built early and reinforced over time. Because if you understand Central South Carolina, you understand the emotional blueprint. Independence, responsibility, mission. And once that blueprint is set, it shapes everything that comes after. So now we return to the house itself, because this is where the internet gets loud and the receipts get quiet. So who lives there? If you came here expecting a hidden spouse, a secret roommate, or a shadowy partner pacing the hallway, here's what the reputable record actually supports. Lindsey Graham's verified home base is in Seneca, South Carolina, not a mystery penthouse or a DC power couple condo. This is the question people type. Where does Lindsey Graham live, and who shares that space? Multiple mainstream profiles and official bios point to Seneca as his residence, the place he returns to when the cameras stop blinking. And here's the key detail that competitors love to stretch for clicks. There is no confirmed cohabiting romantic partner in the sources that matter. No marriage record, no publicly verified partner living at that address. Even in coverage of his own memoir, the story is blunt. He describes himself as never having married, and he frames it as timing, work, and a life that never slowed down long enough to settle into the usual script. That is not a scandal, it's a biography. So why does the partner rumor keep regenerating like it has a subscription? Because ambiguity is oxygen for YouTube speculation. If someone is powerful and private, people start filling in blanks with whatever keeps the comments section alive. Ask yourself, would this question be trending if he posted family Christmas photos every year? Or are we just addicted to the idea that solitude must be hiding something? When you zoom out, the twist is almost obvious. The partner narrative works better as a metaphor than a person. His long relationship has been with the job, with South Carolina politics, with the public grind that demands constant presence and constant loyalty. In that frame, Seneca becomes less like a love nest and more like an anchor point, a quiet reset button between flights, hearings, and cable news storms. And that brings us to the clean resolution. Who lives there? Lindsey Graham does, by every credible account. Anything beyond that is unverified, and it deserves the same treatment you would give a rumor about your own neighborhood. So did this change how you see the headline? Were you expecting a different reveal? And why do we demand a hidden narrative when the simplest answer is often the truest one? Outro. So now you know. The house in Seneca is real. The partner story is not what the rumors suggested. Sometimes the truth is quieter than the headline, but it says more. Did this surprise you? Drop your thoughts below, like the video, and subscribe for more deep dives.